How does it feel like living with the tag of a threat to your own country for so many years?
I remember Afzal clearly saying that if there's going to be a hanging, it'll be me. So every December 16, when the mother would come out in the papers and all, he would say she deserves to be raped. This high-risk ward is attached to the Fasi Koti, this jail 3, and no one had been hanged since '89. Since so we every day we would go. Some of us were allowed in the ground. We would always go in the evening, walking around the ground, and the Fasi Koti was there in one corner, locked up, and it was hardly noticed by us. But suddenly one day there was a fervor. That is 2 days before the hanging, saying that you have to shift from. We were in the front ward. There were two wards in the jail. We were shifted to the back ward. They said they're whitewashing the jail, the high risk ward. So they did whitewash, and the people behind who were in the B block, who were behind, had already been shifted out of the high risk ward. And then we were put there. We thought it's rather strange that what was going on. Suddenly, all the just suddenly whitewashing and suddenly all this taking place. Anyway, then suddenly we found that the B block overlooked the garden, the gate to the garden where the high Fasi Koti was, a section of the ward. That section of the ward in the afternoon was closed and not open. Then we got more suspicious. Why are they closing that? And there was all talk that there's going to be a hanging. And then we gathered from the staff and other people that there's a lot of work going on at the Fasi Koti. So that certainly made it. The staff gave excuses saying, an international team is coming to visit the jail and things like that. There was certainly an impression that something is going on out there. And Afzal Guru also had that doubt. And people then said maybe there was a Khalistani there, Bullar. They said maybe he's going to be hanged. So I remember Afzal clearly saying that if there's going to be a hanging, it'll be me. It'll not be him. And he was quite calm about it.
He
And
knew it. He knew that he might be hanged.
he knew he might be hanged because he
Did he
said
say
that. But
anything to
the
you
night
before?
before,
The night before.
no, the night before we said good night and things like that, I was really in two minds because I was certainly doubtful, but we all hope that it's not so. And otherwise, I really, in my mind, I felt I should take his notes or something like that because he's written long diaries, all lost now. And that those his writings would have brought out what he actually believed in, actually that he was not, but he was opposed to fundamentalism. He was a Sufi. He was a great follower of Rumi and Iqbal and such people, and he knew and he could quote them off the cuff like that. He was well versed in their writings. And but then I said it was a bit too sensitive an issue to ask for anything. And next morning, the gates didn't open at the time 5:30. It opened 45 minutes later at about 6:15 or so. Normally that happens when there's a search team coming. The regular searches in no other jail had that, but Tihar had that. That's another harassment. Regular searches would take place, and they'll throw everything in your cell upside down, and you'll spend at least 2 hours setting it right again.
Hmm.
So he expected. Then in fact, when he opened his gate, he told the people, it's late already. You do the search later. I'm doing my namaz first. And he walked out. His was the first cell, but they locked his cell, and they didn't open any. So everyone realized the hanging is taking place. And he was taken into the front ward where his cell was done up. The law officer was there. This we gathered afterwards from the staff. And this was 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock sharp was the hanging. 2 hours apparently he did his namaz twice. They had tea. The law officer has written in another book on Tihar. He's written at length his experience, and he said in that book also it said he cried like anything after the incident. He was also put off. Apparently, he was led that same walk that from the jail gate, from that ward gate to the Fasi Koti. It's about a 2-minute walk. There was lined with staff, and the staff told us that he told the law officer, please look after these people. You're not doing sufficient for the staff. And they virtually had tears in their eyes. And he went up and I remember him talking to me about Jannat and all that, and that it's great after death. He go and meet all the prophets and all that. So he didn't fear because of that thing, faith in general. We fear certainly because as atheists we don't believe in anything after death. So he
Right.
he they said he absolutely no fear in him. That's the
What was the
staff
kind
said.
of situation there after the hanging took place? What was the conversation
The
like
whole
in
jail,
in
the
jail?
whole jail, not just our ward, was locked for 24 hours. Nothing opened. I don't know why. What could people do? But for some unknown reason, they locked the entire. There are 10 jails. They are comprises a complex of 10 jails. All the jails were locked. That we found out later.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it was only the next day that the gates were opened.
You also talk about the Nirbhaya rapist, Vinay Sharma.
Yeah, Vinay Sharma. Yeah.
Vinay, yeah. Uh, what was the experience with him like?
One of the worst elements I met inside the entire jail: lying, cheating. He had no repentance at all about the rape. And so every December 16, when the mother would come out in the papers and all, he would say, "She deserves to be raped. Look at the way she's talking and all that." I mean, he was
And
basically a white guy. I had no sympathy.
would nobody else in the cell stop him, or would they not
That
protest?
in the Hindi belt, the attitude towards women is very patriarchal. So no one took rape very seriously.
Hmm.
So that is the problem. Whether it's the police staff or the other, most of the other inmates, uh, mm, rape as it. In fact, Jharkhand, I think that's probably the entire Hindi belt is like that. Jharkhand jail, something like 50 to 60% of the inmates were dowry that related, what they call dowry that related cases. And he would not get this thing from other people also, bad vibes or anything from other people, because people really didn't take rape so serious.
Coming
Yeah,
to your new book, Fractured Freedom, Prison Memoir, you've described the condition of
yeah,
jails that you've lived in, especially with regard to Tihar. You've said that it's in a horrific
yeah.
condition. A lot of political prisoners currently are lodged in Tihar. If you can give us, a short snippet of what your life in Tihar was like, and the kind of restrictions, the kind of surveillance, or the kind of conditions that you've lived with.
Actually, I found that Tihar, in every way, was. I've been to so many jails, and no other jail compared with that. Maybe Jharkhand a little bit, but even there, it was not like this. Every step, your veritable breath is at the concession of the authorities. It's just terrible. I mean, I've never seen a place like that. After that, I went to so many jails, but none were like that. And but I've spent 7 out of my 10 years virtually in Tihar, because there the legal process also was so bad. In a fast track court, one case took 7 years, nearly 6 and 3/4 years,
Hmm.
and with excellent judges, with excellent lawyers, and yet the case dragged on in this way. And it was purely the system, not the fault of the judges or the fault of our lawyers, or the system is geared like that. I found that under trials have less rights than convicts inside jail. Can you imagine that? And we are
But
not even
what
charged.
about
All
access
the
to basic human rights and basic facilities inside the jail? Did you have that
no
access in Tihar?
facilities. As far as facility goes, there was no problem with the heart. The facilities were certainly given. But
Okay.
the question is that your self respect, your question of you have to cow before the authorities at every step, at every breath. I had a CCTV 24 hours looking at me in my cell. And that became minor afterwards, because there were so many other aspects. Then, after a certain time, at least I got about 2 3 years of reasonably peaceful this thing. But after about 6 months after the uh, Afzal hanging, we were transferred to another jail in the name of repairs. And there, it was okay, because I was with India's top don that time. I was staying with him, Brijesh Singh. So there was no problem for that 1 year. But after he went, and I took up an issue of this thing, there was regular transfer of high risk war prisoners every 3 months from one jail to another. They didn't put me on that. After that, they put me on that, and that was just terrible. I mean, that destroys every aspect of your this thing. And you can't do a thing then. In fact, in that 2014 to 2016, until I went on a hunger strike and stopped it, where the DG intervened, It was
You
just
went on a
remember I
hunger strike
couldn't do
inside the
it.
jail, you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, in 2015, I think it was, because I said I'm going on any other transfers. I'm not going to take it. You have to carry all your luggage. You have to carry this thing, and hardly you settled in a new place where you're transferred again. It's just
Right,
ridiculous at this age, and you have to carry
right,
it all yourself. I have a spinal problem. I had arthritis. I had this, but there's no help given,
right,
and you have to do that yourself. And then you have to rush and try and get a decent cell in the new place. It's just horrific. And as far as Tihar goes, I mentioned also in the book, when I entered, and by the time I left in 2016 for Hyderabad jail, the rights that we enjoyed at the beginning, hardly 10% or 5% remained at the end. One after the other, all the rights were removed just in my tenure that was there. Right
for
from
example.
Mulakat rights, for example, Mulakat. Mulakat, the people who come in, I've recounted the horrors they face while coming. It's virtually they're treated like victims also, prisoners virtually, the way they are dealt with by the authorities. And in the beginning, they would allow everything, home food, everything. Slowly, fruit, everything. Slowly, fruit was stopped, restricted. Then food was restricted. Then items were restricted. Then everything was restricted. You couldn't bring in anything. Even their pens were checked and things like that. They couldn't do anything. All they could then finally bring when I left was Tihar produced biscuits and bread. That's all. And but at the beginning, everything was allowed. And these are small things that bring a sense of humanity into a person. I mean, home
Right,
food. People just
right,
love. Everyone waited for the visitor and the home food. I think the threat to the country is coming from the rulers, not from me. Actually, if you see even today, or even earlier, the earlier governments, they are putting such cases on people who are trying to alleviate the poverty of the people. There's fear amongst a section of the people who are already dissidents in the media in this thing. So obviously, I suppose they don't want an extra label and give the government a chance. And I can understand their concerns, but I was surprised at the type of support and sympathy I got from my community, the Parsi community, and also my classmates who are all elitists. Actually, if you see Doon School. Yeah, well, in London, I got politically conscious because of the racism. Actually, they talk about standing for nationalism and patriotism. It is precisely that which drew me to communism because I felt that Indians are being shown disrespect. They are in London, and no one is standing up for them. Time there was a surge of communism. The Vietnam War was going on, and Tariq Ali and this Venice Redgrave and all such people were out on the streets, artists, film stars, all that stuff. It was really a surge at that time. And I also found that it was the communists who were taking up the issue of racism in London. So I veered towards communism. It was the international atmosphere. It was also the uh, ground reality in UK.
right,
After some time, I felt that this is not my my CA is not and a corporate job is not what I'm made out for, and I left that and I came. There was an incident also out there where I went to Brixton jail for 3 months, again racist attack. Then I came back to India, and immediately I had no knowledge of any circles around here. I started working in a slum near my house, and by coincidence, the Dalit Panther movement burst out there after a year or two.
right,
And this Worli was the headquarters where I was working. So
right,
I worked with them. And then as I didn't know anything about racism, I didn't know anything about casteism in India. So when this suddenly burst out, I had to study Ambedkar, study the caste system, study this thing. And I really felt it was an important issue in the country. And since then, Anuradha, she was a sociology student. Later, we married in 1977, and she was a leading activist all over. And basically, the large section of our work we've done in Maharashtra is amongst the Dalits. In fact, in Nagpur, we lived nearly 15 years in a largest Dalit basti in Maharashtra, Indora. There was a huge section of Dalits in this Indora who were attracted to what we were saying and all that, out of which Surendra, Sudhir, these were youngsters at that time, and there were more singers in those days. Then they grew
right.
up and became whatever they are.